My dad works in B2B marketing. He came by my school for career day and said he was a big ROAS man. Then he told everyone how much he loved calculating his return on ad spend. My friends still laugh at me to this day.
Not everyone gets B2B, but with LinkedIn, you'll be able to reach people who do. Get a $100 credit on your next ad campaign. Go to linkedin.com/results to claim your credit. That's linkedin.com/results. Terms and conditions apply. LinkedIn, the place to be, to be.
The Agile Brand.
Welcome to Season 6 of The Agile Brand, where we discuss marketing technology and customer experience trends, insights, and ideas with enterprise and technology platform leaders. We focus on the people, processes, data, and platforms that make brands successful, scalable, customer-focused, and sustainable. This is what makes an Agile brand. I'm your host, Greg Kihlstrom, advising Fortune 1000 brands on MarTech, marketing operations, and CX, best-selling author and speaker. The Agile Brand Podcast is brought to you by TechSystems, an industry leader in full-stack technology services, talent services, and real-world application. For more information, go to teksystems.com. Now let's get on to the show. GoDaddy's Made in America series has recently debuted its 5th season, which captures the real, unscripted stories of small business owners as they unfold in real time. Today, we're going to talk about capturing and sharing unpredictable stories to create authentic brand messaging. To help me discuss this topic, I'd like to welcome Sophie Harris, Senior Video Producer at GoDaddy and Creative Director of GoDaddy's Made in America documentary series. Sophie, welcome to the show.
Thank you so much for having me.
Yeah, looking forward to talking about this with you. Before we dive in, why don't you start by giving a little background on yourself and your role?
Sure. Briefly, I worked in documentary film for about 15 years, mostly for HBO documentary films and for PBS, and had some wonderful commercial success, great experience. And about 4 or 5 years ago, I was approached by some colleagues at GoDaddy who asked me to join their team, specifically around doing customer storytelling. And that shift away from sort of traditional journalism into more brand marketing work was a big one for me. But I think what convinced me was GoDaddy's true commitment to really putting their customers' honest experiences at the heart of their storytelling. I was really impressed by the good work that they were doing through their Empower by GoDaddy program, which is a social impact program that offers real, concrete, tangible support to entrepreneurs in underserved communities. And I also just personally and as a storyteller, I felt really excited by the opportunity to work with small business owners. I mean, as I hope viewers can see from the series, it's an incredibly diverse, driven, interesting population that simultaneously affects real, necessary, and outsized positive impact on our nation's economy. So it was a really good fit for me in my professional storytelling journey.
Great. Well, yeah, let's dive in here. And I know you touched on it a little bit just now, but for those a little less familiar with the Made in America series, what was the original idea behind it? And again, I think you touched on it a little bit, but what do you think been its secret to capturing audiences for, we're in season 5 now. What do you think has been the secret to capturing audiences for 4 seasons so far?
I mean, the initial impetus for the series, and really I think the core of it, is to celebrate the resilience, determination, talent, ideas of small business owners across the US. And as I'm sure anyone can imagine, there are some really interesting stories out there. And we were able to partner with this social impact program that GoDaddy has called Empower by GoDaddy, which allowed us intimate access to these incredible stories of entrepreneurs in underserved communities, and really aligns with GoDaddy's mission of empowering entrepreneurs and this idea of making opportunity more inclusive for all. And I think the secret to its success, I think, lies in it's authenticity, this opportunity to tell real stories of real people in real time, which is surprisingly unique in a brand space, honestly. And, getting to watch people overcome obstacles or not in real time and being honest and vulnerable about that experience is captivating as a viewer. And so it's really just, as a storyteller, it's kind of like shooting fish in a barrel. I mean, there are just these incredible stories out there and you just have to turn a camera on. I mean, achieving that intimacy and the nuance is challenging. And I think one of the things that's also unique about this series is that it's a longer format. So each episode is like 10 to 15 minutes, which really allows for nuance and intimacy and getting past the buzzwords and really into some more juicy content, for lack of a better word. So, it's done really well to date. I'm going to mess this up, but I think we're north of 25 million views or so. And a related short film that we made called Big Water Summer screened in competition at South by Southwest and at dozens of international festivals. So having that sort of more commercial validation has been really wonderful also.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah. And I think the authenticity of it definitely struck me in watching it, as well as, we'll talk a little bit more about this in a few minutes as well, but the unpredictability and, not everything goes 100% according to plan or well, or, for everybody, but it's sort of, I think it gives a real, having been a business owner myself, it resonated as well. So several things in there. One of the things, so this season 5 is located in Ohio. What was the thinking behind moving it there and locating it in Ohio?
Filming in Ohio was an incredibly sort of unique experience for us, in a very deliberate choice. It's a region that's, been deeply impacted by economic downturns, opioid epidemic, and, in this Rust Belt region, the sort of shift away from a few giant employers and this towards a real resurgence of small business, and seeing that in real time and seeing those effects on the economy, it seemed like a really sort of perfect case study for some of the points that we're trying to make with the series. Since the pandemic, there's been just an unprecedented increase in new small business applications. I think it's outpacing population growth by like 10%, which is huge.
Yeah.
And so, it's a wonderful opportunity to be able to reflect back, sort of, as you said, like the realities of that journey to serve as inspiration, but also validation. A big aspect of what we're trying to do with the series is not just showcase intimate personal journeys, but also tie those journeys into data from a more 30,000 foot view of like how and why small businesses have an incredibly positive and vital impact on our economy. And so Ohio was just a great place to showcase that. One of the challenges, maybe we bit off a little more than we can chew at the beginning, was that we filmed across the entire state, which was, I'm sure you can imagine from a production standpoint, is just a lot of...
It's a pretty big state.
Yeah, it's a big state. But, what we lost in low sleep and long hours was gained in just like an incredibly diverse population that we were able to speak with, from Cleveland to Appalachia, steelworkers, veterans, refugees, like just really a diverse population with this really fundamental commonality as small business owners who are working hard, have a vision, and are also bringing that success back to their community. So it was a really wonderful experience to get to film in Ohio.
Yeah. And one of the things, speaking to authenticity as well, one of the things that you did was partner with a local production company in Ohio. How do you think that contributed to the storytelling and authenticity? And, did working with new teams present new challenges? Was it an opportunity to gain a new perspective? Maybe all of the above?
Yes, all of that. We worked with a really wonderful production company called King Toledo, who I partnered with really closely. And it is always, anyone who's worked in production knows that there's always sort of an uptick of getting to know each other, learning each other's workflows and all of that. And especially because we often hired local to whatever city we were in. And, we had certain people we worked with in Cleveland and certain people we worked with in Columbus and certain people we worked with in Portsmouth. But what that gave us was a real sort of local, authentic feel, of I may come in there having looked on, done my research and gone on Google Maps, but the person who's lived there their whole life has a much better perspective on where we go for B-roll or, what the best shots of or what's actually representative of their city, not just what makes it into the internet,
Right.
So, yes, it can be logistically challenging, but ultimately for the sake of the story, it's totally worth it. And I was just blown away by the talent that we were able to find in these markets. I think there can sometimes be this attitude of like, oh, you have to fly someone in from LA. That is completely not true. And we had great teams where we worked. It was wonderful.
That's great. That's great. Any other challenges that unfolded as you were filming this season?
I mean, I think one challenge that I always sort of grapple with as a director is around size of crew, like a larger crew can sort of help you make things easier, up your production value. And ultimately, we always end up going with a smaller crew on this project, which really just lends a certain intimacy and flexibility to our production. We are going into people's homes who have never been on camera before. We are asking really intimate, personal questions. And it really helps when it's just a few of us and we can get to know each other and we're not traipsing in with tons of strangers and tons of equipment. And, I think that small crew really helps us be flexible and listen to the people that we're filming and then adjust accordingly. On this production, one of the people that we're filming with, he does barbecue and he will stay up all night doing barbecue. We literally, like, one person from our crew stayed with him through the night with a camera, filming at 2 a.m. as he checks temperatures or whatever. And that's just the kind of stuff that you don't get with a bigger crew.
As a B2B marketer, you know how noisy the ad space can be. If your message isn't targeted to the right audience, it just disappears into the noise. With LinkedIn ads, you can precisely reach the professionals who are more likely to find your ad relevant. With LinkedIn's targeting capabilities, you can reach them by job title, industry, company, and more. Stand out with LinkedIn ads and start converting your B2B audience into high-quality leads today. LinkedIn ads allows you to build the right relationships, drive results, and reach your customers in a respectful environment. You'll have direct access to and build relationships with decision makers, 1 billion members, 130 million decision makers, and 10 million C-level executives. You'll be able to drive results with targeting and measurement tools built specifically for B2B. In technology, LinkedIn generated 2 to 5 times higher return on ad spend than other social media platforms. You'll work with a partner who respects the B2B world you operate in. 79% of B2B content marketers said LinkedIn produces the best results for paid media. And I know from firsthand experience. LinkedIn is where I go to learn about the latest happenings in my industry, network with peers, and share my own insights. It's been a critical component of how I stay informed to make better decisions. Start converting your B2B audience into high-quality leads today. We'll even give you a $100 credit on your next campaign. Go to linkedin.com/agile to claim your credit. That's linkedin.com/agile. Terms and conditions apply. LinkedIn, the place to be, to be. Well, and to touch on something you just mentioned as well, there were some people there that probably were never in front of the camera before, some a little more comfortable with being in front of the camera than others. I mean, everyone did a great job of, kind of letting their characters show through. But what do you see as the role, your role as producer and the production team in, you want to capture that authenticity. You also want to make sure that that they are showing their character and are doing that. Like how do you kind of balance the coaching on screen and all that kind of stuff with letting the person shine through?
Mm-hmm. That's a really good question, and certainly a balance. Everyone that we film with, I have several conversations with ahead of time, which is really, helps me get to know them and get to have a feel for them, but also hopefully helps them get to know me and helps it feel a little bit less intimidating. So I think that pre-production work is really central. Second, I think the vibe on set makes a really big difference. And again, with this smaller crew, we're all friends, we're all having a good time, sort of welcoming them into that community makes a big difference. I think sort of how you run your set can be really inviting or not, and being thoughtful about that. And then I also think it's really comes down to being flexible and open to what they want to say, and so not going in with too many preconceived notions, because everybody can feel that, and so genuinely asking questions and genuinely listening and allowing time in your schedule, which of course, time is precious
right.
on all of this, but allowing and budgeting for that time to give them space to honestly tell their story and not rush them, and, make it a comfortable conversation. Like one example we were filming some interviews with people who I had talked to, at length beforehand, and the person was pretty nervous, and they have some, struggle very openly, but struggle with ADHD. And they had written down all of their answers on note cards, which of course is not necessarily what you want. Come off very stiff. But, we did the whole note cards, and I let them read everything that they wanted off of note cards. And that got us to a place where they were much more comfortable talking openly, and so like allowing that, whatever it took, 20 minutes or whatever, of them presenting their story in the way that they wanted to, and being there for that. And so I think that's sort of a flexibility that we build into our entire approach around production.
So as I mentioned briefly before, one of the things that really struck me as I was watching the latest season was just, again, when you watch something like this, you root for the heroes and you want everything to go 100% according to plan and everybody to win everything and so on and so forth. But what I liked about it was it felt real and not, there were definitely some positive stories and positive outcomes, but not everything necessarily went, was the happy ending all the time. And so with that and trying to film something where there are unpredictable elements, how do you basically anticipate the unanticipated and, feel confident that you're, at the end of the day, regardless of what happens, you're going to have a good story to tell, even, again, when you can't control the outcomes?
Gosh, I mean, that is just a fundamental challenge of documentary film. And I think honestly is something that really, that confidence that things will come together from a story perspective is something that, increasingly in my career, I'm getting to a place that I can trust. But I think it has to do a lot with, one, not coming in with a storyboard or a preconceived notion of what should happen, and I've been surprised enough times when I think I know what should happen and something else happens and it actually is better. That's happened to me enough times that I trust it. And I think with stories like this, it's also about trusting the characters that you're working with and the people. And I think if you have interesting people who at their core align with the brand goals and values, you can let go of the reins. What actually happens is often more interesting than the stuff that you planned for.
Yeah.
And I think, a big reason that I'm able to proceed in that way is, you know, I think GoDaddy has a real sort of North Star of putting their customers' truth and needs at the center. And so we're not coming in with like we need to hit this point and that point and this point, and it needs to all be rosy. There's more flexibility and honesty there. A couple years ago, the film that I mentioned, Big Water Summer, is about a woman named Cheryl Lynn, who's a farmer on the Navajo Nation. And so we followed her through a summer. And of course, going into filming, you come up with all the schedules and all the possible, you know, things that could happen, and you plan for everything, and you have decision trees, and you try to sort of predict everything. And there was an incredible drought in Arizona that summer, and her plants weren't growing. And it was just an outcome that I couldn't control for. I literally could not control for. And I was worried for a while. And then I won't spoil it, but it ends up being sort of the most central, beautiful thing to the story, you know, and she wins regardless, you know? And so anyways, it definitely is something that is challenging. You know, as a producer, you do try to predict every possible outcome and control for things, but you also need to be totally prepared to tear down your plans and go with what's actually happening.
Yeah. No, I love it. And, you know, I think one of the things that lends to the authenticity of the series as well is just, you know, to your point, I didn't feel like there was somebody from GoDaddy saying, hey, someone's got to say our tagline, or, you know, something that may be a little bit far-fetched or whatever. But I felt like there was some very natural integration, and, you know, there was a presence there, but it wasn't heavy-handed. It was there. It was, you know, highlighted the Empower program that you mentioned at the top of the show as well. But yeah, it felt very, very integral to the story and not intrusive. So, you know, what do you hope that viewers are going to take away from watching this latest season?
I mean, I hope that they're entertained. I hope that people come away with, you know, more of an understanding of the power of small business to drive economic and cultural changes. And I hope they also have more appreciation for the challenges and the nuances and the realities of what it's like to take on that journey. And maybe they come away with, which I come away with, is, you know, more inspiration to chase that idea or their own dreams or whatever their thing is that they've been thinking of doing, but maybe not pulling the trigger on. You know, I'm always really inspired by the small business owners that I work with who had an idea for something and are actually making it a reality. And I think whatever that is, I hope people come away with a little bit more, I don't know, itch to do that thing.
Yeah. Love it. Well, Sophie, thanks so much for joining the show. One last question before we wrap up here, maybe to take maybe a higher level view here. You know, there's a lot of marketers and marketing leaders and brand leaders listening to this show. And, you know, I do think that GoDaddy has set a pretty high bar when it comes to branded content here with this series. What's something that, you know, they might be thinking about creating their own brand stories and their own authentic stories? You know, what is something key that they should remember when they're trying to do that?
I think whether it's brand stories or documentary films or some blend thereof, you know, I would say don't start with necessarily the story you want to tell, but start with the people who you want to tell it. You know, I think if you find the right people to tell your story, that's where authentic, transparent, honest storytelling comes from. Put those characters at the center and let the narrative emanate from their experience, and don't try to force it the other way around. Yeah. I think if you listen to and trust the people who you are working with, that's where real magic happens.
Yeah. Oh.
And I think that I think I said it already, but that sort of belief that the customer's truth and their needs is the center, and then building out from that is sort of the goal of what we're doing at GoDaddy with this series, and listening to them and reflecting back their truths.
Yeah, I love that. Well, again, I'd like to thank Sophie Harris, senior video producer at GoDaddy and creative director of GoDaddy's Made in America documentary series, for joining the show. You can learn more about Sophie and GoDaddy and the Made in America series by following the links in the show notes. Thanks again for listening to The Agile Brand, brought to you by Tech Systems. If you enjoyed the show, please take a minute to subscribe and leave us a rating so that others can find the show more easily. You can access more episodes of the show at www.gregkihlstrom.com. That's GregKihlstrom.com. While you're there, check out my series of best-selling Agile Brand guides covering a wide variety of marketing technology topics, or you can search for Greg Kihlstrom on Amazon. The Agile Brand is produced by Missing Link, a Latina-owned, strategy-driven, creatively fueled production co-op. From ideation to creation, they craft human connections through intelligent, engaging, and informative content. Until next time, stay agile.
The Agile Brand.